Okay, welcome to DIY 360. I'm Kevin Bowe, and this is my old dear friend Angie Carlson. And this is going to be fun for me because Angie and I used to hang out in 1981, where before she developed any musical taste. So she actually liked the band I was in back then, which
I loved his band. They were called the Dads. So
that
you can
speaks
look
well
them up.
for neither of us because we sucked. And in retrospect,
That's
you
right.
must see that in some way.
No, I had a great time at every dad show. I really
Now,
did.
you used to come to a lot of those shows with a blonde gal. What was her name and whatever happened to her?
Oh my gosh, you want to know?
Get right up on
It's
that.
actually really cool. She has a band now called Kinda Kinky, and they do.
She's in that? What's her name?
Yes. I used to call her. I can't think of her real name because her name
Big gal,
to me
big-
was Lynn from Hell,
Lynn.
and so I can't remember her last name. She was just Lynn from Hell. She had
Lynn,
ratted
no, I
blonde
do. I
hair.
remember that. Yeah, Lynn.
Lynn and I've actually been Facebook friends with her. And I'm going to go see Kinda Kinky, and they're playing. I think they play the good stuff like Village Green era, that stuff.
I didn't even
So-
know she was a musician.
So like it was a lifelong passion. Like she's still playing. She's traveled.
I never
all
knew
over.
she played. I just knew her as a misguided, haplessly misguided fan.
She became guided and wrote some children's books.
Oh, wow.
I think, or illustrate. I mean, she's done some cool stuff
cool.
and left and came back, and now.
But
she's
we're not
kinda
here to talk
kinky.
about her. We're here to talk
Cool.
about you. Now, you grew up on the Iron Range, right?
Oh yeah, I did.
Like
Hibbing.
Hibbing?
Graduated Hibbing High School, and I'm old enough to have had. I had teachers that had Bob Zimmerman and Bob Dylan, and they'd tell
Really?
stories about him playing Jacket Jamboree and pounding on the piano like Little Richard, and everybody got mad, and so he didn't like Hibbing for a long time.
Well, not
know?
unlike Bob Dylan, you got out of Hibbing probably about 5 minutes after you turned 18 or after you graduated high school.
17. I started college at 17. I couldn't wait. I was like, get me out of this snowbank.
Did you go to
You
the
know?
U here?
First couple years were Augsburg College because, I don't know, I was a Swede, I guess. I don't know.
That's where
and
they
then
go.
I was like, this is dumb. And then, let's see, I was taking a film class at Augsburg, and we could do anything for our film final, and I did something predictable like Warhol films or something.
Yeah.
But a kid he made his own film, which, I mean, whatever. But he had this music, and I'd never heard anything like it, and this is 79. And I ran after him in class, after class, and I said, "What was that, man?" And he goes, "It was the Clash first record, and somebody had brought it from England."
And that was your moment?
And that was my moment that I never looked back. I was like, I must have that record. And then the next thing was I have to go to England. So then that year I did a study abroad in England, and it was 80. And and I remember seeing Marathon 80 in Minneapolis, which was
The
sort
legendary
of a pivotal
music
rock
festival
show.
here in 1980 that had the Suicide Commandos and
Devo and a real famous guy put it on that recently died. Who was that?
The Guthrie, the Walker guy. The guy who worked at the Walker,
he recently died in Bangkok or somewhere. But,
yeah, right.
yeah.
A&R guy. Yeah.
Legendary A&R guy.
But that was the first chance anyone in Minnesota had an opportunity to see new wave bands in a festival setting. So it was a benchmark event.
It was a benchmark, and I think I got a part-time job that summer before I went to England at the Lunds in Uptown, and the bag boys were Carl
Mueller.
and
From
Danny
Soul Asylum.
From Soul Asylum, but they were
Danny.
then called Loud Fast Rules. Man,
And they were
like
good
full
though.
on.
They were already
full
good.
on, yeah, and they were really good, and so lots of stuff was going on. So I remember another like key. While I was in Augsburg, I discovered Jay's Longhorn because it was over on that part of town.
And that's probably where we met.
And that's probably where we met.
would think.
And then
That
because
was a legendary punk rock bar. The most before there was a 7th Street entry. That's where the suburbs and the Suicide Commandos.
that's where
and
everybody played.
Blondie, Iggy Pop.
Yeah.
you
There was
know.
Duffy's and Jay's.
Yeah.
Duffy's and Jay's Longhorn. And Duffy's is where I saw like everybody from Iggy Pop to Killing Joke in
Yeah.
a pretty small bar in the Cramps. And
I opened for the
Replacements
Go-Go's
a
and
million
Echo and the
time.
Bunnymen there.
Yes, the
Yeah.
Bunnymen. I mean,
Yeah.
just oh, did this go dead? Anyway, Yeah, it was insane because it was a pretty small bar. I mean, I remember seeing like XTC, the B-50. I mean, you name it, they played either Duffy's and maybe Jay's, and then Jay's got shut because of Coke or something.
Which is weird because there was just as much drugs going on at Duffy's, but it took them another year or two to shut that place down. But I
Yep.
remember getting kicked out of Echo and the Bunnymen's dressing room. Because they, the lead singer, they all weighed like 98 pounds. They looked like sticks of chalk.
And they were pasty.
They were pasty, not just being British pasty, but British heroin addict pasty. And they kicked us out, us dads, out of the dressing room. I'll never forget Ian McCulloch, the lead singer, said, "You boys better leave. We go take our medicine." And he got a needle out of his bag. And I remember me and the other dads looked at each other and said, "Oh my God!" And we were out of there so fast. It's like, oh my God, these guys are doing heroin.
These guys are scary.
Yeah, they were. I was scared. So we got
It
out
wasn't
of there.
vitamin B shots.
No, it wasn't.
Dang.
So you've done a lot of stuff since then. You've toured with a band called Let's Active. You've been a rock journalist. You've been owned your own publicity company, and now just after
I've worked at a label or two.
Lived in New
Yeah.
York for the last many years, and just moved back here to work at Red House Records, one of our really local treasures as far as record labels go. They've been around forever, and through hard times, and well, no, just through hard times. And so I want to get to all this, but so first, when did you start writing? Was that your first music-related job? Was rock journalism?
Yes, I started writing for the Minnesota Daily.
Yeah.
And I'd been an English major, and I realized you couldn't get a job being an English major.
I was an English major too.
Right.
Yeah.
And
my solution was to drop out, to devote more time to that horrible band.
Yeah, and look at you now. No, it was the right choice. And so then I started writing in the early '80s, and I was writing hard news, and I was like, I want to write about music because then I can get into shows and I can get promos. I was like really into promos because back then everything that was pre-digital, so you got LPs, you got great stuff. I mean, so I was like, I remember, if there was a show in town, I would go.
What was your first show you reviewed?
First show I reviewed.
If you remember.
Gosh. Maybe Rifle Sport or one of those bands.
God.
But
I just saw him a block from here the other day.
Who?
And, Chris. And he looks great. He cleaned up. He looks great.
Amazing.
I know. I mean, like really great.
The things that I did that were sort of worthwhile is I got to hang out with the Replacements. I did a huge story on them. So I got to go to the Stinsons' basement and watch them tear through some stuff. And then Bob Stinson was washing dishes at, what was that place? It was like...
Liquor Lyle's or something like that, or
No, he was like a fry cook on the West Bank at like the Village or something like that. It was called. Anyway, it's like just a diner, and
I know the first uncomfortable, poignant, probing, inappropriate question that I want to ask you.
What?
There's a lot of people around that think that the Replacements wrote "Left of the Dial" about you.
Nope. It's about Lynn Blakey.
Oh, okay.
And Lynn Blakey was in a band called OOK and a lot of stuff.
Athens band.
But I ended up not that many years ago sitting on a couch in Chapel Hill, and Paul had played a solo show.
This is Paul Westerberg from
Paul
Replacements.
Westerberg, probably within the last 7-8 years. I mean, not that long ago, and he came through and played a solo show. And it was
the tour before the tour I did, where he was actually solo, like playing alone.
Yes,
Yeah.
solo. When was that? So.
2004.
Okay, so we're all there, and Lynn comes up to him, and he's not mean to her, but he's not that nice to her, and he gives her this number, and having all my relatives in Minnesota, the prefixes were just like, they made no sense. I was like, that is not a Minnesota number. She's like, Paul, it's so great to see you, blah, 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 and he gives her this messed up number. And then later she goes, it didn't work. But he was kind of funny, and
Promise
I'm
not
not
to
even
blow
going
the
to get
address
into
again.
why he's funny, but
He is funny, but he's neither mean nor nice. He's somewhere. He lives in the
he
gray
lives
area
in
between.
a weird zone, yeah.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
whole nother DIY.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you were doing rock journalism here, and then where did that take you? Did you only write for the Minnesota Daily, which is the U of M newspaper?
No,
or did you?
I wrote for the Minnesota Daily, and then I started to write a few things. There was a really cool fanzine called Matter that Dave Ayers, who became kind of legendary A&R guy, he's out in New York now, but he was at Columbia out in LA for years. And I think he was a Ween's manager or something that I didn't even realize because I've run into him in New York since. But the big lesson to get from all of this is all of this, which seems like it's going nowhere, is that you will run into the same people over and over because it's such a small pool of people that really give a shit.
Yeah.
That if you are driven and you do give a shit, you will run into each other over and over.
It's just a roulette wheel of the same people getting different jobs.
Because, like, I remember doing a big story on the Jayhawks and, and knowing like Mark and those guys before then, you know what I mean? Before they had the Jayhawks and
Mark was in the
Mark
Brunettes.
Olson and the Brunettes,
With
you
Diana
bet.
Benedetti.
And Safety Last for Gary.
Yeah.
So and what's really weird is in New York, when I moved to New York, I'm at some little party with some friends. And this really tall, kind of gawky, interesting-looking woman starts talking, and somebody called her Leanne Smith. And I went, oh, my God, are you Leanne Smith from Minneapolis that used to play with Gary Lewis and all those folks? And we ended up being really good friends, hanging out all the time.
So that's why you can never blow someone off or be a jerk or something like that, because it's going to come back. You're going to be sitting across the table from that same person.
Oh, my God.
My wife always says it's nice to be nice to the nice.
It's nice to be nice to the nice.
It's true.
You just don't know where these people are going to end up. And,
but people remember you. I was rehearsing with Gary Lewis, Jayhawks guy, this morning. Me and Steve Price and Peter Anderson back him up for some of his shows. And I said, I'm going to go hang out with Angie Carlson today. And he was like, oh, Angie Carlson, awesome. I remember her. And he was like, oh, yeah, Let's Active, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So we should. Okay, so you started to write for other magazines, and what year? What was the last year you spent in Minneapolis? 83.
84.
84.
I left in 84, and I was writing for this fanzine Matter, and Steve Albini wrote for it. So it was just again early 80s, but people that would show up later.
Yeah.
So it's like
show up producing world-changing Nirvana albums.
Right. I mean, it's so weird how it all goes. So anyway, a band that I'd interviewed was Let's Active, and Mitch Easter had just produced the first couple REM records, and I had an internship in the South writing for this stupid magazine called Tables. They go, oh, you've worked in restaurants, because I worked at the Loon Cafe in different places, like where the guys from Soul Asylum worked.
Sure.
And we would like get into the kitchen, go to shows all night, pour a bunch of whatever kind of liquor in our coffee, and I'd be downstairs cooking stuff, like whatever, and so he was like, so you've worked in restaurants, so you're working at Tables. So I remember interviewing like the Bangles and Cyndi Lauper stuff. I had a little music section in Tables. Hey, waiters, read about some music. So I kind of worked it in. But I also did a great story on White Castle and how they patented the little holes in the burgers, because I thought White Castles were really delicious back then, because I could eat stuff like that.
Yeah, when we were young. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, when we were young, at Lake Street, go to Lake Street and get the burgers.
Ugh.
I was like, really, those holes?
I
are
lived right by
patented?
that White Castle. It's just, it's murder. It's just,
none of the imitations like Crystal Burger and stuff have those little holes. It's patented.
It's patented.
Dude. Yeah, man.
Yeah, write that down. So you met Mitch Easter in the context of working for that magazine, or?
I had interviewed Mitch Easter, I think, for City Pages, because what was weird is like I was at a weird crossroads, and like I got offered to be the music editor of City Pages, and
Pretty big deal.
yeah, I was really young, and I'll never forget this little wee bit of sexism. I called one of my editors and I said, I'm not going to be able to take this. I'm going to go join this band, and I thought of you. And he goes, well, you doing it would be absurd. And I'm like, what?
And that still goes on.
And that still goes on.
It's maybe a little more veiled now. You know what I mean?
At least he just said it, right? But
yeah.
I was like, really? Because why? I don't know. Like, I guess I was just this wild girl that went to shows, But, so I didn't do that. And I always wondered what would happen if I would have done that. So anyway, but I went and joined Let's Active, and we were on IRS Records.
They were big They were
We opened for like REM. We went and made a record at Rockfield in Wales, which was really cool. And we were on the Old Grey Whistle Test and
which is a legendary British TV music show.
And
you were playing bass,
nope, I was guitar and keyboards.
guitar and keyboards.
Yeah, and like Rockfield, like Robert Plant lived close to Rockfield, and he stopped in, and he's like telling stories of like touring in the South and doing this really great redneck accent and stuff like that. He's just a kick, you know?
Don't you think in that final analysis that people like you and me that are like the survivors in this business that have done it, managed to stay in it, you know, which is,
yeah,
I'm
amazed
you know what I mean?
at this point.
But
like,
really, in the final analysis, it's about the music and sometimes it's about money and stuff like that. But really, I think the biggest takeaway is the stories, so that you can sit there and say, yeah, there we were in the studio in Wales and Robert Plant walks in. Because I'm sorry, that's like, you can't put a price tag on stuff like that.
No, I mean, it was just crazy. And yeah, the guy, Kingsley, that owned that studio, Rockfield, one night he decided to take us out. And he had this like 60s era rolls. It was just ridiculous that he had out in some shed. And he goes, "Come on, me lovelies." And we went to some pub that was like in the hill where it's like live ales where they can't send them anywhere, so you can only drink them right there because all the stuff that's sort of drinking live ale with Kingsley, and he was. Did you
prefer being a musician? What did you think of being a musician? What's your takeaway from that?
I loved being a musician, and that's why it's weird though. I'm glad I have that. When I worked at a label and when I do publicity for bands, and now I do publicity again, I think if you haven't ridden in the van or ridden in the tour bus or whatever, there is a certain kind of weird monotony of touring that people don't get. And I mean, I've also worked with publicists who are like, "I can't believe this band isn't going to get up at 5 and do this early morning TV show." And I'm like, that's because they load it out at 2 a.m. They've got this drive, they've got this and this. It's like, you know, I don't ask people to do that stuff. And it's like,
sometimes you have to, but the worst is when you show up at 5 a.m. and it's some funny morning DJ and they have no idea who you are.
Right.
And so you walk in and they go, "Okay, so, you know, before we start this, who are you and what have you done?" And especially with Google now, it's just like, seriously, you didn't even have 5. I'm here at 5 a.m. and you didn't have time to Google me. You know what I mean? And so
in that case, whoever set it up, like it's weird. I'm working at Red House, but I'm taking a couple artists with me that I like to work with, that know me, that I don't have to be all BS with, because I'm too old and crabby to do that. "Oh my God, you're so wonderful." I just can't do that anymore. But I've worked with the Indigo Girls for a long time. I work with this 80s band Squeeze, Difford and Tilbrook, that are they're pretty famous in some circles.
Black Coffee in Bed, Tempted.
John Spencer from Blues Explosion.
Those are all your clients you get to take with you?
John Spencer, he's a real loyal dude, and so I didn't have Blues Explosion, but I had his band Heavy Trash for about a decade. That's his rockabilly band. So I do them. And Spencer's a hoot, really, really smart guy. Went to Brown and stuff.
The label you're working at now that you just moved back here to work at, they're letting you do your own PR
as long as, we'll see if I can manage it. We'll see if I can balance it. Yeah, I do this band Portland Cello Project as well that's going to play at the Cedar. Those guys are kind of brilliant. So I'm going to work as many side things as I can, but gosh, I don't know. I mean, my first priority is going to have to be Red House because those are my peeps. They brought me here. But it's like...
How many hours are there in the day?
Right, and I don't mind working all the time. I mean, but... Yeah, it's like my job and my real life have blurred for so long.
Oh,
do you know what I mean?
Everyone in music, yeah. Your social life is your work. You don't...
Yeah, like I got a call last night from WCCO. Amy Ray hasn't called us yet because Indigo Girls are coming, so I text Amy. "Amy, just sending a reminder, and here's the phone numbers. Let me know. Call in the studio." And then she called. So it's like I kind of assume that I'm going to be on 24/7, but the people that know me know that I'm going to be there, you know? So it's like a trade-off. It's like, you know.
So when you the Let's Active thing wound down, and then is that when you started doing publicity, or what was the
okay, so let me see.
What happened after that?
I did Let's Active, and I toured for probably about 7 years, and I was just a musician.
Was it that long? I didn't know it was that long.
And you know, we played Europe and this and that, and And I was married at that point to Mitch Easter, who produced those records, but then he produced some other kind of cool records. So I
Yeah.
got to spend a lot of time sitting in studios, and it kind of rubbed off, seeing albums being made and stuff. And then
Did you like live stuff more or studio stuff more? What did you find funner? I mean, the studio, obviously, it can be monotonous and requires a lot of patience, but then the road is 22 hours of monotony for 2 hours of glory.
I don't know, studios are pretty fun.
I think so, too.
Studios are pretty fun. And all the stuff you can do. I mean, and this was back in the day where, you know, there wasn't quite, I mean, Pro Tools was just coming in and stuff. Now you can do insane stuff. But I still like old analog gear, probably just because he had such a great collection of it, and I know the way it sounds. And so I like that stuff.
People would travel from all over the world to go record. What's this called? The Drive-In Studio? And it was in
and now
North
he has
Carolina?
a studio. He still has a studio. I know Pavement made a record there and stuff out in Kernersville, North Carolina. But he has kind of an amazing collection of analog gear because he was smart enough to buy those tube limiters and stuff in
When
the
people were
early
throwing
80s.
them away, yeah.
People were like, you know, like we'd be at Abbey Road and people would be using this amazing old tube limiter as a doorstop, and he'd be, you want to sell that to me, you know. That he was that guy, so he was very smart about gear, you know.
So how about being in a band while you're married to the leader of the band?
Oh my God! I mean, so many people do it. I mean, and it usually doesn't go well, but anyway.
But it must have got, 7 years. There must have been some...
we were together 9 years. So it went pretty well. I mean, it can be really fun, you know?
What's not fun is being in a band with two people that are in a relationship. I've done that because I was talking earlier about this today with somebody about that. There's only two possibilities on any given gig or rehearsal day. If you're in a band, there's two other people in the band that are in love with each other or whatever. One, they're getting along. Ew. You have to watch them be all lovey-dovey. Hate that. Two, they're not getting along. Ew, codependent nightmare. So. Yeah,
it's like, So, I mean, but there's so many bands like that, like Superchunk on Merge, you know, they're split up. I mean, I'm thinking of, there's so many bands where.
Blondie?
Yeah, so many bands where that happened, you know.
So after Let's Active, then you were New York based?
No, after Let's Active, I'll try to say it fast. So after Let's Active, I was in Winston-Salem. And I decided to move to Chapel Hill because Winston-Salem, at the risk of sounding like an old hippie, I think it had really bad energy. I really
did sound
do.
like it, yeah.
And
that was very Portlandia.
But you know what? That was pretty Portlandia. Where's my nest to go sit in? But I really did. And it's funny that I said that because the other woman in Let's Active, and she had dated Mitch Easter before me, and there were a lot of weird parallels in our lives. We had the exact same birth date. I mean, not the same year, but we were both born September 13th. We dated the same two guys. She dated my other boyfriend, played in the same band, and she just killed herself like a week ago.
Good thing you moved.
Good thing I moved. No, but everybody that stayed there
location.
into location. They just kind of went into the drain of bummerness, and I was like, I'm getting out of here. So I went to Raleigh-Durham Chapel Hill, which was when all that stuff like Archers of Loaf and Superchunk was just getting started. And Merge
Big
Records,
hotbed of, what's that, like
the North Carolina scene.
Early 90s? Is this early 90s?
Mammoth Records, early 90s. Mammoth Records was starting to have hits, and so it was kind of a good scene, and there was a good club scene, good energy, a lot of really fun bands. And so I moved there, and to have enough money to buy a house, I waitress because I didn't want to go after my ex. So I let him keep everything, and because I was just like, I just want to go. So I ended up in Chapel Hill, and I had a house and waitress for a while, and then they had a local out weekly called the Independent Weekly, and they now have that big hopscotch fest, which is pretty cool. But I was reading it, and I was like, God, this weekly's so shitty, man. And somebody goes, oh, really? Why don't you put your money where your mouth is? So I got a bunch of old clips, and then I said, would you guys just give me a chance to review something? And they're like, sure. And I said, how about Hank Jr., who I didn't like? So I went to the show.
What's not to like?
Oh, he is a master. He's a class act. So anyway, I went to see Hank Jr. and I wrote this just ridiculous send-up of his show in the audience and all this. And they said, hey, come and write. And I was like, okay. So I started writing. And then pretty soon they offered me a job, and they said, "Do you know computers?" And I went, "Yeah," because like, I don't know. Like,
I tell
knew
my
how to
students all the
type on
time,
them
if
and
someone's
shit.
asking you a question, do you know how to do this? And it's for a job, no matter what it is.
Well,
you
and-
say yes. You lie.
Well, in my defense, I didn't realize I was lying because I didn't know how much there was to know about computers. And I'd actually typed on one. I was like, how much can there be to know, you know? And I mean, this was in the 90s when you had to save things to disk and all that shit.
Yeah.
And they started me out, before I became the music and pop culture editor, they started me as calendar editor. So it was still like HTML code and all this shit, but you'd have to save it. And I'd save it and I wouldn't know where it had gone and all these things because I'd never really been on a computer. So finally the editor came out. He was a really cool guy and he goes, "Angie, why didn't you just tell us you didn't know about computers?" I kept saying to people, "Can you find my data or whatever, you know? Can you show me
That
some
happens around
stuff?"
here with Pro Tool sessions once in a while. Usually you
so-
only have to lose one, and then you learn your file management.
I'd be there till like 9 at night re-entering shit, you know? So I finally figured it out. And then got to be music and arts editor. And I did that for a few years and I really dug it. But they were paying me like living in a group house wages. And I was like, you know, and
So
then
that's bad, right?
That's kind of bad.
Yeah, it's bad.
So then I was like, wow. And now this time I'm, you know, fairly grown up. I'm in my 30s. I'm paying a mortgage and stuff. And I'm like, you know, I'm seeing it as the cost of joining the normal workforce to work for so little, like a paid internship. And so I went to him, and then I got to do a lot of cool stuff because I was editor, so I went to visit Bob Moog before he died in Asheville, which is where his thing was. And it just happened that he was relaunching the Voyager synth. So I got to hang out and hear stories.
Bob Moog. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. The Moog synthesizer.
He
Okay.
pronounces it
I thought you said
Moog.
Bob Mold before he
Bob
died. And I was
Mold,
like,
yeah.
Bob Mold died?
Bob
Okay.
Moog. Bob Moog. So he
Okay.
was really funny. And they also sell theremins and stuff. If you're ever in Asheville, North Carolina, I think they'll give you a tour of that place. And they now have Moog Fest. And he died a couple years ago. But so I got to hang out with him, and he was talking about the early days of electronic music in Paris and Kingsley and all those folks. And he was awesome. And and then I got to meet Sonny Barger, who was the infamous Hells Angels at Altamont. And I was like, we went to Hells Angels Cafe, and I'm interviewing him because he has a book out, and because I just wanted to. And
Have
I'm
you
like,
seen his little turn on Sons of Anarchy?
No!
He kind of plays himself in prison. It's pretty convincing.
Dude, he is spooky dude. And so I said, you know, off record, we're eating cheeseburgers at the Harley Cafe. I said, did you guys really, you know, want to kill the Stones or whatever? He goes, if we would have wanted them dead, they'd be dead. That was his answer. Whatever,
And
dude,
you said,
you know?
I'll pay for lunch.
It's like lunch is on me.
So what brought you? Did you move from North Carolina to New York?
Well,
Or was there something in between?
I quit right then because I said, they thought I was joking. I said, I gotta, you know, if you can't pay me more, I gotta go. And they're like, yeah, we'll pay you more. And then they didn't. And then I gave my notice, and they went, so what are you writing about this week? And I said, no, I gave you my notice. And they go, you didn't mean that. And I go, yeah, I did. And they go, and this is the best. If anybody ever says this to you, run. They go, but don't you want to influence the scene? And I'm like, no, I want to pay my mortgage. You know,
Yeah.
It's like I care about the scene a lot, but I'll care from a place to live.
Yeah,
You
right.
know, so then Yep Rock Records said, you want to try to do PR, which is how I got into PR. And so they brought me in, and they had a really obsolete database from Rounder Records. And once again, I'd stay till like 9 at night for those first few months, and I
Now that guy that owns
taught
Yep Rock,
myself how to do
he's a
PR.
lunatic, right? The owner guy. I met him at a South by.
Which one? They get butt wasted.
Yeah. When I met him,
Absolutely
he was
wasted.
out of his mind.
They're like childhood buddies that are like LTD, living the dream. And so when they get out on the road, you're like, this is my boss, and he's like puking in the bushes for real. You know? It's like-
Great roster though. Great bands. I mean,
Really
they
cool
put out
roster.
Nick Lowe records and
And
things
a
like
lot
that.
of people that I had toured with in Let's Active. So it's people like Robin Hitchcock, who I'd interviewed way back. And I still see Robin, and he's like, hello, Angie, you know. So I'd work
That's
with,
nice.
yeah, he's a real nice guy. So -5, who I'd worked with. So yeah, Flesh Tones, who we'd toured with back in the day. So I ended up there for like 4 years and stuff. And then I went to Minnesota when my ex, who's a musician, and I split up. I was like, I mean, not Minnesota, New York.
Oh, okay.
I went, I'm going to go and I'm just going to join one of those really big PR firms and see how it's done. So I joined because I thought, I'm pretty old to do this, but I don't want to stay in Chapel Hill now because I'll run into my ex everywhere. You know how that is.
Yeah, small town.
It's very small town, and very small town for what we did, you know?
You moved to Brooklyn and you were working at a big PR firm in Manhattan?
Yes.
Wow.
And so I joined Press Here Publicity, and they have like Lenny Kravitz, Phoenix, Pink. So I was setting up stuff for like Spiritualized, playing Radio City, and the Wombats tour, and OMD, and, you know, kind of big stuff. So I did that.
Loved it, hated it?
Things about it I loved, but pretty brutal. I mean, New York is brutal. So when you go there, you know, they paid me really well because I was a senior, but there was a little group of people that had been there for like a decade. So once I got there, I didn't realize I was supposed to bring in my own clients. So I brought in, you know, I brought in like the Indigo Girls and John Spencer and blah, blah, blah. And I brought in from Minnesota, I brought in Trampled by Turtles. And I did the record Palomino that kind of broke them.
Mm-hmm.
So,
That's significant. I mean,
Yeah.
to me, I don't know, did a big PR firm, did they care about those acts? Or were they like, no, we only care about Lenny Kravitz?
not as much as they cared about Lenny Kravitz and
Yeah, right,
Pink,
right.
you know? So, but they made me pass on a lot of really cool stuff because it was all about money. It was the bottom line. And by the end of it, I was just getting so cynical because, like a cool label like Hardly Art was a subsidiary of Sub Pop, and I was doing this band Moondoggies and some other band. They had kind of some cool garage and stuff, and I'm like, you know, I'd love to work these guys, and they're like, well, they don't have enough money, and so you couldn't. I mean, but then somebody would come along that was really terrible, and they would have the money, and then you'd have to do it. So I mean, I
Care
could
to mention any names?
Oh gosh, the worst thing I ever worked, well, I worked two things that were really depressing. I worked one with Carlene Donovan, who has like some huge bands. And it was like, they were like a kids group on Disney that all wore like jumpsuits or something. They had a show and like,
I love them.
yeah. Oh, and I got to do comedy, and I brought comedy to them because my ex does some comedy and tweets and stuff. So I got to do the Mighty Boosh when they came to the States, and that was about my favorite thing to do. Their English comedy show that you should watch on YouTube or BBC or whatever. You can watch it. It's really out there and really fun. And I did Tim and Eric's.
Oh,
Whatever the hell it is.
I
Shave
knew we were
Your
going to get
Bush
a woo
tour,
on that.
Whatever.
These guys are big
Whatever it was
Adult
called.
Swim fans,
Yeah,
most of our
so
students.
I had my ex had friends, and I'm still friends with Dave Willis at Adult Swim. So we got I got Trampled by Turtles to do the Squidbillies theme.
Oh,
And I did some other stuff I had done some stuff for Dave. So I did some comedy for them, and but yeah, then I worked a little bit for this label Partisan, and they were not together and stuff, and I was like, I'm just gonna do my own stuff, I can make more money. So I was in New York doing that, and I'd met Ellen, the woman at Red House at
Ellen Stanley.
yeah, at a convention, like at either the Americana conference or
Sure.
South by South,
Total
one of those.
sweetheart.
Really sweet lady, and she, this guy Craig Shelburne, who's been at CMT and one of the main guys there, is like a buddy. He's a professional drinker, as am I, you know, and we like to go eat at nice restaurants. And so, like, I always hang out with him at South by. We get together and we dish, you know, and whatever. So when he gets me
Dish
into
and
things,
nosh.
we dish and nosh. And so, like, so I met Ellen, and she was so nice. And then I had no idea of moving back to Minnesota, and I was
Oh,
like,
wait,
wow.
backtrack just a second. When you started your own firm, that's called Propeller Publicity.
Yeah.
And how long was that? Like 5 years ago?
No, I was in New York. I was at Press Here Publicity for 4 years. And at the end of 4 years, I was making the exact same money as when I started. And their commission structure was kind of really dodgy. And I was like, I'm working, I never hardly worked less than 10 hours ever. And they kind of ruled by fear instead of by good vibes. It was like definitely like, when I quit, Linda Carbone, who said to me, she goes, I'll kill you and you won't know how I did it. I guess my reputation or whatever. And I just sat back and I said, I will know how you did it because I'll be dead and I'll see everything. I'm like, whatever.
That was your severance? That statement was your severance?
Well, I tried to give 2 weeks notice, and they're such a paranoid little thing that after a few days, they locked me off my computer and walked me off. Of course, I'd seen people leaving. I asked him, I said, am I one of the only people that's ever like left on my own thing? Because usually they were very sadistic, and I saw so many people that they'd get like quieter and quieter. You all work in a big room, or they'd burst into tears at their computer, and then one day they'd just be escorted out. You were not allowed to talk about it.
Institutionalized.
Yeah, and I was like.
So I can see why you started your own firm.
Yeah, I was like, if I was like really young and I just wanted to get into millions of groovy shows and have this on my resume, then I would maybe do it. And I wasn't so worried about quality of life. But,
It creeps up on you, that quality of life.
That quality of life. And I remember like having things like, I would almost never have a vacation, but I was supposed to have like a week or so. And I went with a friend to Vieques in Puerto Rico, and Sam, who was supposed to be taking care of all my clients, he goes, Linda, that was the head, Linda put me on something else. So then I asked I said, who's covering my work? Who's covering my acts? Yeah. So I'm at the beach, and I'm on Wi-Fi, and I'm setting up my interviews. At least I'm on the beach.
Ruining your vacation.
Well, I'm just like price of my job, but it doesn't have to be like that, but the weird thing is, like, if you go to New York, it's like, it is really, nobody works an 8-hour day. Nobody works an 8-hour day. Nobody, there's so many people that, my experience was, I met some really wonderful people and friends, but I also met a lot of people, and especially in the industry, it's so hard to get ahead that everybody's looking for an edge. So, like, if they drop the ball, they're looking around who to put it on.
Yeah.
And if somebody else makes something work, they're going to line up and say, hey, thanks, yeah, I did do that. Even if they didn't. And so you're just kind of, especially from Minnesota, like...
It's hard to take.
I guess no matter how long I'd lived away, I still kind of had Midwestern values, and that got to me. That wore me down. I could have stayed there, but it's so expensive too. But I think
always
if you're
feel like
young,
in New York and
it's a
LA,
good
like
thing.
you're just dog paddling. In other words, you're working really hard just for the privilege of living in the city that you can't enjoy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because you never get to like do anything except for work. LA and New York can be like that.
Yeah.
And so you're not like saving any money for retirement or anything. You're just paying rent rather than although apparently you beat the system because you bought a place in Brooklyn.
I bought a really craps fixer-upper in Chapel Hill, sold it in under 2 years so I didn't have to pay capital gains, and I got a kind of a risky venture for North Williamsburg, which then blew up. North Williamsburg is now
So
like
really,
hipster
you've been in the
central.
real estate business for a few years is probably what you've been in.
Well, yeah, it's kind of disgusting. It's like, I realized I did want to sell. That's the other thing. If you buy in New York, you should talk to me because there's so many pitfalls. It's like whatever.
The word you're looking for is Byzantine. It's Byzantine.
There's so many costs of doing business things. Like all the new condos and stuff have built-in crap, and it's just a matter of time before the assessments are going to bite you in the ass. So I was going to try to hold on to my place, and then I went, it's hot right now. They haven't realized what is wrong with my condo, but they are very close to. They're very
timing.
close to it. And
funny.
there's going to be a big lawyer bill assessment, and the shit's going to hit the fan. And I'm like, I'm going to sell to somebody that can afford the shit to hit the fan, because I just barely got in there, you know? And now it's like international buyers and stuff. North Williamsburg's
Yeah.
like Bourbon
My sister's
Street.
lived in Brooklyn for like 20 plus years, and my brother
She lives
has a
real
place
close to me, yeah.
Yeah, so that's funny. So now you met Ellen at this conference or
Yeah.
whatever, and she mentioned that she was going to be leaving,
No, it was like...
or you just got to be pals.
And I think she had a radio show at KFAI.
Sure.
And maybe I set up a couple of my artists, maybe Indigo Girls, maybe some other folk artists, Alini Mendel, maybe, I think I must have been like... She was like, hey, can these folks come in? Sure, be glad to set it up. And then I talked to her a bit, and I said, oh, yeah, I grew up in Minnesota. Da, 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 da. So then, like, years later, she's like, hey, you should really apply for this job. You're from Minnesota originally. And I was like, wow, because I'm the oldest and all my family's here. And I was like, wow, I could actually be close to my family.
Your family's still up in Hibbing, or are some of them in this city?
My parents have retired to a home like about an hour north of Hibbing that's on a lake that's really nice. And then I have a sister in Brainerd. And then I have a sister in Cottage Grove, and I have a brother in Lina Lakes. They're all kind of scattered around.
Mm-hmm.
And none of them have anything to do with rock and roll, which is awesome. It's very grounding, and they don't care, So, so yeah, it's
Great
it's
timing.
really-
And
yeah.
you've been back here for like 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Like I just bought a car last week because I didn't have a car in New York. So now I'm trying to remember how to drive, and I have navigation, and I'm like, oh. So
Yeah, that's working out great.
yeah.
So,
I'm like,
you guys, I don't know if
Kevin
any
is
of
a
you guys have
mess.
ever considered a career in publicity or have ever dealt with a publicist or anything like that. But if you have any questions about that, or rock criticism, rock journalism, or doing publicity for a label, or what it's like being a woman in a touring band, then you should ask a great question right now. Who's got a question? There's one.
I end up having a lot of people ask me to do PR for them, and maybe they don't have a label, or they don't have management, or I don't have time or whatever. So I like try to help them, and I just say, or maybe it's like friends of friends, and they're like, how do I even start getting myself out there? Nowadays, everything you got to have your social networking together. Like your Facebook page should have your tour dates. It should have some links, blah, blah, blah. If you have time to have a website, or Tumblr converted to a website so it's free, I would do that. You need to build a Twitter presence, because if you do get a label or whatever, or tweeting, you want to start building up followers. And I always tell people, don't tweet stuff like, show tonight at blah, 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 blah. Tweet some goofy pics of what you're eating on the road, or dumb stuff, or, you want the info in there as well. But you also want some stuff, where people you get to know you. And so, okay, let's say you have a tour date. Ideally, you want to work the date as far out as you can within reason. I mean, like
8 weeks.
8 weeks, 6 weeks. I mean, because then you'll hit the monthlies. And print media, isn't that big a deal anymore, but it sort of is on the road. Like, you want to hit the alt weeklies, you want to hit the dailies. So what you could do, if you just didn't know where to start, is whoever booked this show, either the agent or the venue promoter, call a promoter, see what they need, get the details about the show, and then say, can you pass along a media list or press opportunities? My artist...
Almost all of them will have that.
Most of them will have that, and you'll say, my artist is willing to do press, willing to do some... and sometimes, like, if it's an artist that I worked with a long time, and I know, like, their radio team, like the Indigo Girls are on Vanguard, and Vanguard's busy right now with Matt Nathanson or whoever the hell it is. So I'm like... I'll just say, hey, are there any good drive time radio shows that might want to do a ticket giveaway, or that might do a live phoner, tape phoner, that kind of stuff. So And if it's a market that I've never heard of, I'm like, so who are your local buddies in the press? You know, who covers you guys a lot? If they were like, we don't have a media list, then I go, okay, so you must have some local press. Who covers you guys? You know, who around there? How do people find out about shows? There's a thing called, is it Mondo? Mondo US or whatever, where I'll just Google Mondo, you know, Mondo. Is it the Mondo site? There's a couple sites where you just can Google and then hit media. And it's like, wow, I wonder if there's a regional NPR station. I wonder, it's a small town. I'm like, gosh, there must be a college station. I'll Google, you know, college newspaper, Champaign, Illinois, or whatever, and then I'll just try to find out a contact, and I'll call them up, and I'll say, hey, I've got, you know, so and so coming to town. Do you guys ever have sessions or do ticket giveaways? Anybody want to go to the show? Live blogs, you know, just find out what's out there, and then you can send, like, then you make your little email press release. Your press release in the subject line should always have the band, the date, the venue. You know, like I've got, you know, Portland Cello Project coming to town with Jolie Holland on, you know, September 7th, the Cedar. So then when it opens up, it mentions, you should mention their latest release and offer to send them a download. I usually don't put a download link just open for people because then you're just like, putting it out there. You know, I'll put like downloads available on request, but I'll usually give people one free MP3 at least they can use. If there's a good link to live footage, or the band has done television, or they've got a real good, they've done Day Trotter or one of those things where you've got a good session, I'll say, check out the recent Day Trotter here, and I'll usually hyperlink it or whatever. And then
the whole thing is making it easy for them.
Easy,
You're doing their job for them.
Easy.
And if you're ever asking for help, this is my big thing. Never ask anyone for anything that you could find out yourself via Google.
Yes.
Or you will just annoy or enrage them, depending on how old or crabby they are. But I get like that, too, when people are like, you've played Duluth before. How do I get press in Duluth? Seriously? Seriously? You know what I mean? It's just like, I Googled. I figured that stuff out by Googling.
I do too. I Google all the time. And I mean, I'm on a national PR listserv because I've done press for so long with a lot of the other companies and stuff. And we'll ask each other sometimes, but we always Google and try to find mastheads and stuff first. Yeah. Like, and every once in a while somebody will be lazy and go, oh, who's the new editor at blah, blah, blah? And somebody will go, oh, it's so-and-so. Thanks, Google. Like, oh, snap.
Yeah, exactly. But it's kind of insult. It's like it's a way of saying to somebody else, my time is way more valuable than your time, so I'm going to ask you this rather than Googling. And it's just like, well, no.
Wait a minute,
People like to help the hardest working person in the room. They don't like to help the person who's sitting there going, well, I don't know how to do anything, so what should I do? You know what I mean? People run from that.
Databases for press, the industry norm is FileMaker. And so if you know your way around FileMaker, that's an asset for anything usually. I think they use it in marketing, they use it in the entertainment biz. But like right now I'm using some strange one that I'm going to get used to. And people use other things. But definitely you got to keep your database up, because if you're doing tour press, you know, you're only as good as the people you're reaching out to. And
these guys have free access to Celebrity Access or whatever. We've got that for the school here.
That's
there's
good.
a lot of, if you go into the library here.
Is that what Cision is, or what
I'm not sure, but I know that there's through the librry here at IPR, these guys have access to really expensive pay sites.
Well, when you do those pay sites, I mean, when I was working on it was at Press here. We had Cision, which might have changed its name. And but you just look up. It's like, wow, I have this artist that I think will be really good for women's magazines. I want to get her in Bust and Nylon and blah and blah. Well, if you don't already have a database, then you can go on those and say, who's handling, you know, the blog? Who's handling video premieres? Who's handling first listens? You know, and also like, don't insult people. Like, try to figure out like if I'm going to a new blog and I'm going to pitch them, first I go and see who they've covered. If they're covering electronica, I ain't going to pitch a folk person. You know, I'm not going to insult them. If they're pitching, you know I sometimes try to code my writers. This person likes Americana. This person's only indie rock. This person likes rockabilly. This person likes folk. This person likes blah, blah, blah.
There's enough rejection out there without going and begging for it.
But also what it means is if you hit somebody a couple times with something that makes no sense for them, if you ever do have anything that makes sense for them, they're going to think you're an idiot already. They're just going to block you or whatever. So you won't even get through, right?
It's a lot like high school, really. It is, actually.
And so it's sort of like, and also you got to know what you're talking about. It's like if somebody... a lot of people, I remember I had a girl, it was my intern, and everybody wants to just send email blasts into the ether and hope for the best, but I do believe sometimes that you should call. And especially like if there's a tour market and there's a handful of key contacts and you might catch them. Like Wednesdays are usually deadlines for the following. You might want 10 days out from a weekly to get print. But some weeklies might be a few weeks out. But if you get somebody on the phone, they're like, oh, okay, that issue's full. And it's a few weeks out. No, we've got a big local festival. I can't get you any press for so-and-so. And I'm like, well, how about, do you have a blog online? How about I give you an MP3, or maybe I could... you got any folks that would want to do an email Q&A? Email Q&As are instant content with them doing no work. It's like they write, what's it like
you just
touring?
define modern journalism.
Right. So, there are a lot of lazy folks out there that, if it's something that I think is important enough, but then again, unless your artist is the babiest of baby artists, don't waste your time on tiny little blogs. Go to... Alexa and Quantcast, and I think you have to pay for Compete now, but enter your blog and see how many unique users. Now it's almost to the point in some places where owning a computer means the person thinks they're a journalist, and it's like, but I have a blog, and I'm like, yeah, and you and 50 other people go on it. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or maybe not even that, It's like you try to find their traffic and they're just not even on the grid, and you're like, okay, my artist is kind of tired. My artist, I have artists that won't do email interviews because basically it's like, can you give me some content? I need content for this issue. And it's like, can you write about yourself for a while? It's like, no, I'm kind of busy writing songs, having a life, and performing. That's how I, and
again, not to repeat myself, but the other thing is I've done those where they go, so who have you written for? I'm like, I pay $10 a month for this website, and my whole discography is up there. You couldn't look at it before we talk. I know I'm not that big of a deal, but it's like it's not hard.
Well, and I think it also separates the real journalists from the fake journalists, because the only people that have ever gotten huffy with me about an artist not filling in this, like an email interview, where literally the last question was, is there anything you'd like to just talk about? It's like, no. This is what I do because I have to, because I'm promoting my
I'd like to talk
thing.
about how much I hate email interviews. I'd like to talk about the decline of American journalism.
And, it's sort of like, and they're like, well, we're giving you press. And it's like, if somebody needs press that bad, there might be, I have worked with like baby artists or helped them out where, if they really enjoy writing, what the hell, And I'll just say, do you enjoy email interviews? I have one guy that writes like pages and pages and pages. It's this band Frontier Ruckus. Have you heard of them? They've played Lollapalooza and stuff. They're kind of up and coming. Kind of sound like they're kind of more indie folk, whatever. But the guy is just an amazing writer and just enjoys it. It's like his hobby. So he can turn the most banal question and just flip something brilliant off. Yeah, and it's like, I know he is like that and digs it, and I'm like, okay. But
you can do that.
But I'll always preface it.
I'll
preface it with, this isn't a high traffic site, blah, blah, blah. but it's this market, maybe the site. And I check out sites, and because I'm old enough and have done this long enough, where I remember when Pitchfork was a news site. I remember when Brooklyn Vegan was a news site. I remember when, so it's like, if the people have their crap together, even if they're little, and you can kind of tell that they have good taste and the writing's pretty high quality, then sometimes I'll do it when they're going, because I used to be a writer, so I guess maybe I can look at it and go, this is worth doing. These people seem to know what they're doing. This could potentially be
Probably
a site
helps to
down the road.
empathize with all sides since you've done all these different
maybe.
jobs.
So it's like, if the site is small but really well done or super specialized, then maybe it is a go.
Right.
But it's like, I just basically don't want to waste the artist's time doing something dumb, or pointless.
We can find, speaking for artists, I can say we can find our own pointless, dumb things to do to fill the days.
Yeah.
Anyone else got a question for Angie?
I don't know if I answered your question. Okay. there's
Anyone
a lot
else?
to it,
How about a big, warm round of applause for our prodigal daughter returned? Thanks for coming, Angie. Thanks for coming, you guys.
Thanks for inviting me, and I hope there was some little nugget of something in there.